And I generally don't believe that technology can ever replace humans. That's not a fear that has, cut through to me. I just always think there will be more to do. As humans, we have so much untapped potential because we've been stuck doing jobs that are below our potential. So if technology has more processing capacity when it comes to, say, AI, for example, yeah, great, because it can solve a lot of the problems that we've created for ourselves in this world because we're limited, So, yeah, there are so many different ways from like sewing, upcycling is the way I'm introducing it, but even marketing, I think it provides so many opportunities for startups where you have small teams doing a lot of the work.
Hello everyone, hope you're doing well, hope you're looking after yourselves. Welcome to another episode of the Hustle Chronicles, too many recordings in one day. To the Student Guide, where we bring on amazing entrepreneurs, freelancers, creatives, graduates, all doing incredible work. But the most important thing is we bring you an honest conversation on stuff that can help you during uncertain times. Whether it is trying to find a new job, whether it is trying to navigate into a new career path, whether it's even trying to figure out your next steps in life. This is your one-stop place to a guide of amazing conversations with amazing people so you can figure out what's next for you. As you know, we bring on amazing guest speakers, and I always say every episode, and I will continue to say, I do not like doing introductions. So I'm going to hand over to this amazing individual today. Giovanna, thank you for coming on. Could we know a bit more about you and what you do?
I'm Giovanna. I'm a fashion entrepreneur, specifically within the sustainable fashion tech space. I run a business called The Fashion Blueprint, and we essentially build solutions to foster sustainability in the fashion industry, particularly tackling textile waste colonialism.
Perfect, thank you. We'll dive into your journey in just a bit, because there's a lot to discuss, especially from your bio on our website, but also we know each other outside of, from this, but also through work. So I will also be touching on a few things there. But yes, as we start every episode, we have the 44 question segment, where Amanda, the founder of 44 Words, gives our guests a creative way to express themselves through dialogue. And there are two. And I was originally only going to ask one, but I feel like I'd like to ask both. So the first one is, what is something you have recently learned about yourself?
Ooh, I am strong. I never used to like that, because I feel like sometimes people, when you go through difficult situations, people are like, but you're so strong, you're so strong. And I almost used to take it like as an insult, because it's like, no, this is a very difficult situation, regardless of whether or not I'm strong or fragile. It's a difficult situation, and no one should go through that type thing. But now I'm like, no, I am strong, actually, and I can handle things. I can, deal with hardship and difficulties and still take it on stride and, just overcome difficult situations.
That's wonderful. And I feel like, literally like we said there, it's something that sometimes people make it seem that, like, being strong or even being able to persevere through tough times is like a bad thing or something that, is a skill you can't gain through life. But I think that's really powerful that you've mentioned that. Second question is, how do you overcome self-doubt? Which kind of links to your answer just there.
By doing things. My self-doubt is overcome by evidence of what I've done in the past or just executing. Even if I feel nervous about things, if I have an idea, I know that God planted that idea in me for a reason. There's so many people in the world. If I had an idea to do something, it's because I am uniquely qualified to execute it. So it's a matter of actually making it happen. And then I'm like, oh, I did it, So I overcome my self-doubt by actually doing things and going against it. Yeah.
No, that's wonderful. And I think, like you said there, like, it's like faith on a personal level as well, like we discussed this as well, plays an important part into like how I work, how I move, business, personal. But I think there, like you said, like it's also sort of like remembering that, like you said, like if this idea didn't just come from nowhere, like someone gave you the inspiration, the idea, whether it's with with the Fashion Blueprint, whether it's even with like your career journey, your choices. And I think, like as you mentioned, it's like knowing that you can talk as much as you want, but it's only when you're like doing it and you're actually like, that's the only way that you can really like prove, whether it's doubting yourself, whether others doubt you, that you can be like, actually like, my results speak for themselves.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
Thanks for the questions, they were quite fun.
Yeah, no, honestly. check out 44 Words. They do have a book. Amanda does have a booklet that has like all these questions that we've asked all the guest speakers. So you might have heard a few different ones. But if you'd like to see all 44, please get in touch with Amanda from 44 Words. But yeah, we're going to start with the first question, which I think is the best place to start. You founded the Fashion Blueprint after witnessing firsthand the waste in the fashion industry. And as someone who has a side venture or another creative business linked with sustainable fashion, I definitely know about the impact of that. But I'd like to know what moment or experience led you to say, this has to change. Like the waste that the fashion industry is, like all of this stuff is so bad that you were just like, I need to put my mark and like make a way for sustainable fashion.
I'm trying to think, and I don't know if there was like a moment where I was like, this needs to change and I'm going to do something about it. I do remember that at different points in time throughout life, I just became aware of the effects of our actions as people, even from primary school. The primary school I went to really educated us on why we should recycle or the effects of pollution, things like how air pollution causes ozone depletion that would eventually lead to global warming. So from young, that sort of climate justice, environmental consciousness side of me was, I guess, nurtured from then. So as I grew older and I started to develop my own interests and then went to university to study fashion, it's not like that side was ever separate from me. So I do remember that in third year, I believe it was, we watched a documentary in class, which was The True Cost. And it essentially talks about fashion supply chains, where clothes originate from, and the environmental and social impact of fashion production, whether it's like polluting waterways or literally causing like diseases in people or even like carbon emissions as well. A lot of it was addressed, or the mental health effects on people who kind of like buy into marketing messages and stuff. So it came from education in general. So whether it was from primary school, or then more specifically to the fashion industry's effects on the environment and society. So I would say that was probably like the catalyst, where it's like, I'm aware of this issue. So then when going into the industry and seeing how no one really cared enough about it to create a change, that's when I kind of was just like, do you know what, this doesn't speak to me, because knowing everything that I know, I can't contribute to that same thing, you know, because I do believe that our actions have an effect on others, whether we see it or not. So when you do know that the way a business operates actually has a very detrimental effect on other people, whether it's children or adults or older people, it didn't align with my values. So that's what made me kind of just try to carve out my own path in the industry.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think even to touch on sort of like what you were mentioning there, so we'll start off with a mic check, which is an interesting fact or figure that relates to what we're talking about. And the UK Parliament, there's this, the source is UK Parliament Post. In 2023, they released a document on the sustainability of the fashion industry. And according to this document, it said over 350,000 tons of clothing end up in landfills every year in the UK. And I think it's interesting, as you mentioned, because this was like one of the comments that they said is, despite there being a clear increase in awareness about sustainable fashion. And I think this is sort of like links to what you said there about sometimes it seems that a lot of people are saying that there's a lot, like they see the issue and everyone's like talking about it, everyone's raising awareness about it, but is there being action to tackle it? And I know it's the same with my degree. You know, a lot of people say like, I'd say, arguably, to be fair, the average person would say this too. But people were saying before that, like, when it comes to like sustainability, you'll mainly think like the industries that always get picked up are construction and aviation, because they have quite high inputs of carbon emissions. But people don't always think about fashion. And as you said, sometimes it's just like that disconnect in the chain from consumer to sort of like other parts of the fashion like chain and like how clothes get to you. Yeah. And we've discussed this before. I'm pretty sure we'll discuss it in like upcoming questions. But even, you know, like you said, on like a cultural level, you know, it's interesting to see how the word sustainability or like the theme of sustainability is embedded into different cultures. So, you know, I know there's another podcast I listen to. I recommend people to check it out. It's called Ain't Got a Clue. One of the host was joking about that, like, he's part Nigerian, and he was saying, like, oh, in his household, or in most Nigerian households, I'd say it stretches to African households as a whole. Like, an ice cream tub doesn't necessarily mean it's ice cream, or a butter tub doesn't mean it's butter tub. Biscuit tins aren't biscuit tins. And there's always, like, especially in, like, African cultures, in my experience, there's always that, like, focus on, like, reusing things, and even, like, clothes being handed down. But I know, like, growing up, like, the idea of, like, wearing your siblings' clothing wasn't seen as, like, okay, we had this, like, inferring people would think that you were, like, either poor or, like, you know, you couldn't get the latest things, so you weren't necessarily, you weren't cool and things like that. But then that's why I find it quite interesting that nowadays that sort of, like, societal shift and, like, I guess awareness of sustainable fashion has changed that perspective. And you see people, yes, they're still, especially for, like, teenagers, they will always want the latest things. But you've got stuff like Vinted, or you've got stuff like Depop, which focus on reselling old items. And have actually, like, grown and developed. But to me, like, when those apps came about, I was like, yeah, it's a smart idea. But those are things that I've been doing, like, since, like, my family's been doing for ages. And my parents talk about, like, something very common in Nigeria as well. But yeah, I think it's really interesting that you mentioned that. Yeah. We're going to go on to the next question, which is looking at your, like, personal experiences. Now, you grew up in Lisbon. You've also grew up in West Africa as well. So you've not only got a multicultural lived experience, but let's be honest, you've worked with a lot of global brands. And this is the opportunity where you can name drop and highlight the amazing work that you're doing. But how have your personal experiences influenced the way you merge fashion, technology, and ethics?
So I'm from West Africa, but I grew up in Lisbon and London. So there is definitely a global perspective there. But in terms of how my background, would you say, has experienced what I do? Is that what you mean? Completely. Just even from when I said that from primary school, we were educated on environmental consciousness and climate justice, that affected how I view the world. Then coming into London, where everyone is just, like, so fashion forward, more than people actually realize, and so much more experimental with their style. And also where fashion is accessible to most people, I would say, even if it's like the charity shop or even if it's like the more fast fashion brands, but accessible. Fashion is accessible to a lot of people in London. So that affected also my style, or how I, like, the way I view the potential of the industry. Like, it's a fully formed industry in the UK, whereas, for example, in Lisbon, growing up, I wouldn't say there was much of, like, a fashion scene per se. There were a few shops, but everyone shopped in the same places. There were markets, but most people didn't really shop in markets, for example. Most people didn't shop in, like, charity shops or secondhand shops. They were kind of frowned upon, to be honest, in Lisbon, as far as I remember. But funnily enough, the whole notion of actually wearing your siblings' clothes and stuff that was more normal to me, actually. Like, I remember I always used to pass down my clothes to my sister, and she'd be so happy that she gets to wear my clothes because she fits them now. Or I would deliberately go to my older cousin's house and tidy her wardrobe. I'd be like, oh, this is such a mess. Should I go through your clothes and we can sort it out? And it was so fun to me to go through all of her clothes, because she was a teenager and I was probably, like, I don't know, maybe 12. So to me, she had really cool clothes. So I would go through her wardrobe, and the stuff that she didn't want, she would pass on to me. And to me, that was, like, the best thing ever, because I knew that people wouldn't really have that stuff, because people kept their clothes for longer as well. So some of her stuff was like her mum's or other people's as well. And it was quality stuff. It looked as good as new type thing. So that notion actually isn't that foreign to me, even though I did grow up in Europe. And then coming here, it was more like, I did change my mindset for a period of time where I was just more so interested in just buying clothes. And I liked that clothes were cheap here as well in comparison to, like, where I was from in Lisbon. But funnily enough, I do also remember, like, not the beginning, but when I was maybe 16 shopping from eBay. Because, before I had like my first job, I would obviously have to ask my parents for money for everything. Right. And if you want to spend all your money on clothes, it's like, it's not really, your allowance isn't going to allow you to buy everything that you need to buy. So I still had to find the cheapest ways of getting clothes. And I remember eBay, I would bid on eBay. Those were the times where you could get clothes for like £2, £5, and they were good stuff because you just bid for them. Also remember going to the charity shop in school, or just normal shops as well, but I always had this sort of like, I never really frowned upon like secondhand, if I remember correctly. So yeah, that comes from my childhood. So all of my experiences have affected me. But then also when I say being from West Africa and actually being able to see the effects or the damaging effects that the fashion industry has on the local textiles industry, for example, or even if it's just like the sheer volume of secondhand clothes that end up there, and some of it gets sold, but some doesn't. And then we know that a lot of those countries do not have the infrastructure to then process the secondhand clothes or recycle them and so on. If we don't have them in the UK, it's like, imagine where the priorities there are more so health and education, or even like transport and so on. So yeah, all of this like global perspective, I would say, has completely influenced the way I operate, even till this day, because sometimes people are like, oh, but sustainable fashion, even saying controversial things like, oh, black people don't really care about sustainability or they don't have time. I'm like, what black people are you talking about? Are you talking about black British because they have the privilege of not seeing the effects of, say, fast fashion? Or are you talking about black people from Africa who actually can't go to their local beach because it's polluted, or that, have, issues on their back from carrying crates and stuff with clothes. So it just makes me understand that my single reality isn't all that there is, and it helps me to be more empathetic as well and seeing things from other people's perspectives.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you've touched on it a few times, and it'll be good to go into a bit more detail. But you've mentioned obviously the impact that fast fashion has on the environment. For anyone who's watching, listening, who doesn't know how, what would you say are like maybe the top 3 impacts that fast fashion has on the environment?
If we're talking about just the environment without talking about like garment workers and stuff, the simplest way to explain it is, so when a fashion brand designs a collection and then goes to a factory to get that made, the factories usually ask for minimum order quantities. So you can't just get 10 items made, you have to produce in bulk. That's how the factories make money. But in buying in bulk, without any sort of proof of demand from a brand's point of view, that means that when the stock then goes to the brands and it's marketed and stuff, there is always surplus stock at the end of a season. Because also, in the way that fashion brands operate, there's a time window where you have to sell your products within that specific time window, because they operate with seasonality, trends, so there's this need to always have a constant flow of stock, or this notion that, oh, that's last season or that's old now, just because you made it for a specific time window and we're not there anymore, which doesn't make sense anymore, but that is how the industry was built. So what happens to the items that don't sell, And we don't really think about it, but it's like once something has been reduced and it goes into markdown or even outlet, fines, more people buy it, but then what happens to the stuff that people don't buy as a whole? Where does it go? Or when people throw their clothes away, where is away? When charity shops are not able to sell all of the stuff that they receive, because now it's also lower quality stuff, so it's harder to resell. If you're buying things that are quite flimsy, or where the fabric isn't heavy enough, or people know it's not going to last, because if you bought something for £2, how much can you really resell it for, So if it goes to the charity shop, how much is anyone going to really want to pay for it? So if it doesn't get sold, typically, as it is now, things just get dumped. Majority mainly in the global south, so places where they know, like recycling companies or liquidators, as they're called in fashion, can just essentially ship all of this dead stock. So they get paid by brands to discard the stock, but then they ship it to countries in the global south because they know that no one's going to complain, you know, because they have other things to think about. But what that does is imagine all of the clothes in the UK that we don't want. Why do we think that people overseas are going to want them, you know? And once it gets there, maybe some get repurposed, some get upcycled, some get resold in local second-hand markets. But even those second-hand markets actually destroy the local traditional textiles industry because there's so much stock that comes in at a very low price. So people just tend to buy second-hand now in the local markets. But then when it doesn't get sold, where does it go? And it just keeps coming. Like if we talk about Ghana, for example, receives millions and millions of items every single week. So it's like, where's it all going to go? And it ends up just accumulating in the seashores or it ends up in landfills, in essence. So that is, and in terms of like the environmental impact you have, so if you, let's think about it this way. If the beach is covered in clothes, obviously some of it is going to go into the waterways. So then that compromises sea life. Then when it comes to like clothes accumulating in landfills, they do release carbon emissions, specifically methane, which is one of the most damaging forms of gases that can go into the atmosphere. So yeah, all of that then means that one, there's the effect, the most obvious effect is global warming, which some deny that it exists, but it's there. Again, I mentioned it destroys the local sea life, but it also destroys the soil. And when it comes to the soil, we need to think about waterways, actually. And if your soil isn't good enough, then it compromises agriculture and the food industry. So there are so many other industries that are adjacent to fashion that can get affected by fast fashion, you know? So it has a repercussion on a lot of other people and, local environments.
100%. And I think even like when you're talking about like the wider impact, I know one thing we did with my undergraduate was one of my professors, he did his PhD on literally like textile dye waste in India and like how it was polluting like waterways. And yeah, literally like we said, like it was causing issues not just directly with like water sources, but also with the soil, crops were being affected, parts in certain places, like the soil could no longer be used for like agriculture because of the impact of this waste. But yeah, you also mentioned the garment workers themselves. So what is the impact on the garment workers as well?
So again, the easiest way to explain it would be if I want to make a t-shirt, and that t-shirt sells for £2, how much did I pay you for that t-shirt? And in that £2 is the cost of materials and is the cost of labour and my profit. How much did I pay you for that £2 t-shirt? How much are you getting paid per t-shirt?
Essentially, I'd be surprised if it's anything more than 50p is a stretch.
That's a good pay. Yeah, you know, per item. Yeah. So that just gives you an idea of the level of exploitation that there is in this industry. And it isn't just in fast fashion, to be honest, it's the industry as a whole. Even luxury brands sometimes do produce in the Far East and then they finish the goods in Italy and then label it as made in Italy and stuff. Some do still manufacture in Europe, but manufacturing in Europe doesn't mean that it's more sustainable. Actually, there's still exploitation that happens in Europe, even in Leicester. You know, you have so many people that get smuggled here to work in factories, and because they're illegal, they don't get paid like a normal minimum wage, which is already low anyway. So imagine even less than that to survive on. So a lot of those people end up living in those factories with their families, whether it's with their little children and stuff. So there's that level of exploitation on the garment worker side, and it's just so complex. There's so much more that I could tell you about just that single issue, from like working hours, for example, because they get paid per unit, and because it's not a lot, and they have to pay rent to live in these factories in maybe rooms with like all of the other garment workers. So you can already think about how unsanitary, I can't remember what the word is. Unsanitary, it didn't come out naturally. You can think of how unsanitary that is, or how it compromises your health. Because if somebody has a cold and they're sleeping in a room with like 50 or 20 other people, we're all compromised now, do you know what I mean? So there's so much to it, or like even safety as well. Some of these factories don't invest enough in the safety of the building, or they themselves outsource. So they have the factory that they show to clients, but then they have the smaller units where they actually make the clothes, and usually it's just in very like precarious conditions, I would say. So there's so much to that issue of garment workers, where even if they were to, in some places they have like unions, so they try to come together and demand better working conditions and stuff. Now, thankfully, because we have social media, they have more of a voice as well, because we can see what happens behind the scenes, or it can get documented and spread out. But still, if these people don't have phones, then what? You know, or if you don't even get to see what the actual working conditions are, because you as a client are shown something that doesn't correspond to the reality. It's just a very layered issue that doesn't get thought about enough. But then it's so interesting because you have people who are like feminists, but then they still buy into fast fashion, and fast fashion is mainly produced by women, women garment workers. So what about their rights? You know, when we talk about human rights, it's like, yeah, it needs to be all-encompassing, because sometimes we see ourselves as people that care about a certain social issue, but only as far as we can see, or only as far as it affects us or our neighbour, but not necessarily, we don't think as deep as, where do things actually come from? How are they made? In what conditions? And how am I contributing to that system, you know? It's not a problem that's easy to solve, but this is essentially what it is now in this day and age.
100%. And I think, like you said there, it's interesting to see nowadays that people are very much like, essentially people are saying that loyalty with brands, whereas it exists now, is not the same as it was like 20, 30, like 60 years ago. Because like you said, people are very much conscious of like, where do these items come from? You know, people say a perfect example is like Apple. So where do all the minerals that go into an Apple phone come from? How are these, like you said, how are these workers being treated? How are these materials being done? And that has caused people to change from buying a new iPhone every year to say, actually, you know what, I'm not happy with this, or I'm only going to buy second-hand phones. You know, it's also interesting, as you mentioned, with, like you said, like, even on a local level, it's not really thought about. Because I don't remember if it was Boohoo, I think it was Pretty Little Thing with the factory. I think it wasn't actually in Leicester.
It's both.
It's both, yeah. Because that came out. I'm pretty sure it was during COVID as well. But yeah, that came out that they had like the workers there, and I think it's interesting because, like, for me when I saw it, I was just like, okay, cool. You know, this is going to mean these brands are going to they're going to get shut down, because, you know, especially in the UK, this is wild. Like, it's wild in other countries, but it's like, the UK government can only do so much, but you're like, in your own country, you know, it's been announced this happened, you know, there's been documentaries, people are reporting on it, and then, yeah, it's just like, people are just like, yeah, this isn't okay, I'm not happy with it, you know, their workers should be paid properly. But like you said, it's almost as if people, like, if it's not within their sphere of, like, influence or knowledge or what they can see, it's almost as in, oh, okay, cool, like, this is bad, but, like, there's only so much I can do. Which, yeah, is really interesting to you to mention. We're going to go on to the next question, which is all around for students this is for like our student and early career creatives who are interested in sustainability. They might be very passionate about it, but they might not know where to begin. And that might be sustainability in different aspects. So sustainable fashion, could be sustainable living, it could be sustainability to do with construction, aviation, anything sort of like that. But with all of these areas, you know, evident through what you've just shared and through your whole story, you are passionate about sustainability, but you create with impact. So what practical steps can these students, creatives, take that they can ensure that whatever they're creating within the world of sustainability is created with impact in mind?
Do you know what? That's an interesting question, because in the way I look at it, I would love it if people stopped looking at sustainability like something that is separate from everything else that we do. And I would love it if people started to look at it as something that is a part of every single thing that we do. So it's not about you thinking, I'm interested in sustainability, where do I begin? It's like, you can be interested in construction, you can be interested in aviation or fashion or theatre, and then embed sustainability into that field. I don't know when you talk about sustainability, if it's something more like people who want to reverse climate change. If that's the angle, then I would definitely start with education, so you can actually measure the impact of your work. So I would say that you probably have to have a bit more of a scientific background to a degree, so you can actually understand how our actions affect the atmosphere as a whole, and then think of how to potentially reverse the effects of our actions from a more scientific point of view. But then again, why can't that be embedded into an industry, like any industry? Do you know what I mean? 100%. So I would, in terms of where to start, I would start by thinking, what is an industry that you're genuinely passionate about? And then from there, researching and educating yourself about how the industry is now versus how there could potentially be a better way of doing things, even if it's by like combining things together. And I love it when different industries overlap. Like, I think some of the best fashion designers have like a background in, could be engineering or architecture, do you know what I mean? And they bring that way of thinking into fashion. It's the same way I would look at sustainability. It's just a way of thinking. So how can you bring this way of thinking or all this knowledge that you have into an industry that you're passionate about and where you think you could create the most impact? Yeah,
definitely. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned like other industries, because I know at uni they were talking about, like, we did a module on looking at a company and then what they're doing to basically sustainable, and someone picked Netflix, and I was just like, Netflix, like what's Netflix doing within the world of sustainability? And they were just like, oh, actually, as a company that does like productions, they have a sustainability policy. So they was talking about things like, so for anyone who's watching, and I will say, context, it has been a while since I've done anything environmental science, so this might be out of date. But they were talking about essentially so as people who walk around, we don't usually think about like what could get stuck on our shoes and stuff. But they were saying like seeds from like different places that sets are and get stuck in missions that go to different sites and stuff, is because sometimes you can bring essentially seeds of different plants or stuff to other parts of, whether it's the UK, London, stuff like that. And the reason why it's an issue, especially with like international travel, I know it's like, it can be a huge issue, is because this then allows, some of these like plant species are invasive. So they're not built for this environment, but because of whether it's the temperature conditions, whatever, they flourish, which causes the plants that were homegrown or like they've been here for like ages to then be put at risk. So they have a policy where they were just like, oh yeah, we make sure that, everyone has to like sort of like de-seeds, they have to look through like their boots and make sure things are removed. With sustainable productions, it was also the idea of like, okay, if we're going to produce a set, it's not going to be, we produce this set and we demolish it and we're never going to use it again, or like we just built it for this film. It's like, could we use it for any other productions at the same time? But I think, as you mentioned, it's like looking, like I guess like you said, like just thinking with sustainability with your, like as a mindset rather than like a specific like industry. It's really interesting because, yeah, like you said, you might be passionate about like theatre, and then you could learn about how, I don't know, maybe it's theatre productions are now saying they want to use second-hand clothing to design all their costumes and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, that was such a good example. I only know about it because of Australian Border Control. I don't know if you ever used to watch the program. They are so strict. And seeds was actually one of it, and flowers as well, not bringing flowers from one country to another. So interesting.
Yeah. But it's literally like you said, like it's one of those ones where you like even when it was mentioned, I was just like, I don't really think about it. But they were just like, yeah, no, it's actually a huge issue. It can put like, and they were saying even like on a more I guess on a serious note, they were just like, these non-native species can then cause like essentially affect the whole ecosystem within that country, because it's like, okay, cool, these, like you said, like if there's a seed that's not if there's a plant that's not in Australia gets brought over, or vice versa, that could then change the whole ecosystem. It could affect
all the crops, for example, and then what are you going to eat,
exactly.
So it's, it has a knock-on effect, basically.
100%. We're going to go on to the final question before we go into passing the mic, which is when you get to ask me any question. Mental health is really important to us to pick up the mic, and we love to share resources that can support your mental health. And that's why we are so glad to have today's sponsor. Thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. BetterHelp is the world's largest therapy service, and it's 100% online. With BetterHelp, you can tap into a network of over 30,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with a wide range of issues. To get you started, you just answer a few questions about your needs and preferences in therapy. That way, BetterHelp can match you with the right therapist from their network. Then you can talk to your therapist however you feel comfortable, whether it's via text, chat, phone, or video call. You can message your therapist at any time and schedule live appointments when it's convenient for you. If your therapist isn't right for any reason, you can switch to a new therapist at no additional charge. With BetterHelp, you get the same professionalism and quality you expect from in-office therapy, but with a therapist who is custom-picked for you, more scheduling flexibility, and at an affordable price. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/pickupthemic. I've also linked them down below in the description. So again, that's betterhelp.com/pickupthemic, MIC, and start your journey today. Any questions you like. But with the launch of Fashion Upcyclers, how do you see AI and tech playing a greater role in tackling issues like waste colonialism and building a more circular industry?
Oh, this is like such an exciting question for me because when it comes to the fashion industry, they have been so slow in adopting new technologies. And it's so interesting because it's such an innovative industry when it comes to ideas and pushing boundaries in terms of concepts and designs, but not when it comes to its own structures and systems. They very much still operate how they've operated for the past 20, even 30 years, you know? And that's very damaging because the world is evolving, consumers are evolving, but this industry is still producing at the same rate it was producing 10, 15 years ago, you know? So in the way that I envision it, technology can be embedded into all aspects of the production process, whether it's like, I'm thinking where most of the issues lie when it comes to dead stock, let's say. Sometimes it could be literally at design level where some designers are just creating things which are too avant-garde for the average consumer and it doesn't sell, or things that are ill-fitting, for example. So technology can come into that side of things where you can do 3D scanning of so many different body types to create the perfect fit, you know, and that then means that a product can be bought by most people, worn and enjoyed by more people, should I say. So there's that, there's the design aspect of things, or reducing waste in the product development side of things, for example, where in the traditional process of design, you have to sample a lot and you waste so much fabric, time and resources in sampling back and forth. But you can introduce like 3D rendering, for example, into that side of things and like visualize a design before you make it, or even try it on in your digital avatars before you make it in real life. There's technology being applied in the fabric sourcing side of things, for example, even recycling and being able to basically decipher because now there's so many like blended fabrics. So you have technology on the recycling side being able to identify what the different fibers are to then understand how you can kind of break that item apart and recycle it. There are so many opportunities when it comes to upcycling, specifically in the way that I envision it. It's more so being able to reimagine a company's dead stock and turn it into something new with the use of technology and AI. We've been using AI well, to be honest, it was frowned upon at the start, and it still kind of is to a degree. A lot of people are still afraid of it, and they think that it can replace your jobs, it can replace humans. I think it can replace mundane jobs, jobs that maybe you didn't want to do in the first place. I don't enjoy admin, so if it can replace that, then great, you know? That means I have more time to focus on the things that I actually want to do. And I generally don't believe that technology can ever replace humans. That's not a fear that has cut through to me. I just always think there will be more to do. As humans, we have so much untapped potential because we've been stuck doing jobs that are below our potential. So if technology has more processing capacity when it comes to, say, AI, for example, Yeah, great, because it can solve a lot of the problems that we've created for ourselves in this world because we're limited, you know? So, yeah, there are so many different ways from like sewing, from, upcycling is the way I'm introducing it, but even marketing, I think it provides so many opportunities for startups where you have small teams doing a lot of the work, or things like e-com photography, for example, can be, you know, handed over to an AI tool. There are so many different ways. I could speak about it all day, but if I was to like just give a general message about it, I just think it's such a great opportunity and a great time to actually see how we can use not just artificial intelligence, but technology as a whole to improve the fashion system and to make it more circular, also stop overproducing and making better things, higher quality that people can actually enjoy, you know? So yeah, that's what I would say.
Thank you. Now it's over to passing the mic. So we will swap roles. Do you want to let me know what question or questions you'd like to ask me?
Okay, so how many questions do I get to ask you?
You can ask as many as you like.
I think I have one question.
Okay.
And the last time I spoke to you, we actually had such an interesting conversation and it turned into Bible studies. So I would love to know what role faith plays in your life, especially when it comes to you, like producing a podcast, speaking to people. What role does that play in your life, and how does that influence your decisions?
Okay. I think that's the first time I've ever been asked a faith-based question, so thank you. I think for me, faith plays an important part into into my life as a whole, but especially with like Pick Up the Mic. So as a Christian, I think it's very much about like focusing on being, and it's funny enough because like I'm doing like a Bible plan, like it is on like entrepreneurship. So it was
look at that! Yeah, I love it.
So
Quick promo.
But literally, it's on like the importance of like small beginnings, and we're saying so like my phone's recording, so I can't. If I can make the Bible verse and I remember to do this appear, I will. But it was talking about the whole idea of like two things. So one, like when Jesus said, like, there's a parable where basically it says, like, if you're trusted in little, like, if you're faithful in little, you'll be faithful in much.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And then there's another one where it says, like, what was the other one? Where Jesus compares the kingdom of God to being like the kingdom of heaven, being a mustard seed, and said that even though it starts as like the smallest seed, it then grows this big shrubbery and trees, and you know birds like land on it and stuff like that. So to me, it's like two things: of one, remembering that like when I like with my business, it doesn't matter how old it's been running for. I don't need to worry about like it's better to go at a steady pace than to like keep going and then just failing fast. And I think for me, like faith plays an important part in that, and to reminding myself that like, yeah, like I can, like I don't need to like rush ahead, or I might see like, I don't know, someone else, their businesses have been the same age as mine, they might be like getting grants and all of this stuff, but it's like, oh no, like I should be comfortable with where I am and grateful. Not like I have to be grateful, but like grateful to the opportunities that I've got through this. And then I think also like secondly, even like through the people that I've met through the podcast, like I think the biggest faith thing the biggest faith lesson I've learned with this is just being open to like reaching out to people, like bringing people on. So I talk about it specifically with this podcast for our 50th episode. I was looking for a guest, trying to find someone. I was like, should we find like someone who's big in their industry? Should I try and get like a big name? And then I was thinking, oh, we're gonna have to pay them this and that and that. And then essentially I went to this event, and there was this person who was on a panel. I shout her out all the time. Her name's Indy Love Gordon. And I reached out to her and I said like, oh, hey, so I saw her at the event and I was like, hey, I loved the panel discussion you did, like it was amazing. This is a bit about me. We're literally doing a 50th episode and I'd love for you to be the guest for it. From based off what you shared today, it was really great. And she was just like, yeah, cool, let's chat. And then, yeah, that whole conversation, like working with Indy has been really great because we started off with just the podcast episode, but even on the day of the podcast, we booked like a 2-hour slot. I think I stayed there maybe for 3 hours or 4 hours, because literally before we started the recording, she was just like, yeah, tell me a bit more about you. I want to know about you, your journey, your business, what you want to do next. Like, and she was working for a company called Foundervine. She's an angel investor as well. But yeah, for me it was just like nice because like she didn't have to do any of that. She could have just been like, yeah, we're just going to do the podcast episode, thanks, and go home. But yeah, for me it's been like open to like the guests that can come on, because some of these guests, even like they're now a community partner, but two sisters called Donna and Abigail, they founded an organization called STEM, which was all about promoting women in STEM. And even to this, like, this is generally, some people who've been on the podcast, it has to be God. Because I don't even remember how we got it. Like, I don't know, they were hosting an event, and I don't remember if I reached out to them to say, could I go? Or they reached out to me and said, oh, we see your work, we'd love for you to come. But I went to their like first anniversary for their like business, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. Like, I'd love to have you guys on the podcast. We kept in touch. And like since then, we've worked together on events. I've done like work for them. They've helped provide like guests to be on my podcast. But yeah, I'd say faith in the sense of just like, I don't know, like you get a nod from the Holy Spirit. It might be like, send this person in the DM, or like, you know, maybe this person should be on the podcast. And you might be like, oh, that's not the type of guest I'm looking for. Like, that might not be the type of business I want to work with. But yeah, you never know. Like, through doing that, like, something great can happen. And like, through working with STEM, through working with other organizations, through this podcast, other podcasts, it's been great. And yeah, I think one final thing to add on this is one actually, I should shout him out. It's called Our Power on YouTube by a pastor called Bobby Schuler. But he was actually talking about like himself as a pastor, and like was saying with the Holy Spirit, he said you shouldn't never feel like, whether it's with business or a big life decision, that you have to make it like in that moment. And he said if someone's turning around to you and says like, oh hey, you know, I've got this much money, I'm going to give it to your business, but you need to do like a pitch to me right now. Or he's saying like, oh, they're just like, oh, you know, this is super sensitive, you have to do it. And he was just like, you haven't set aside time to like pray, wait about to hear it. He was just like, you're, so yeah. And it was interesting because he was just like, you're not, like, not to, he wasn't like criticizing anyone, but he was saying like, if you're saying like, oh, I didn't, like, God told me to do this, and you're doing a quick like 1 minute, 30-second prayer, like, God, this guy just said to give me money, give me the inspiration and wisdom to like do this. He was like, how can you say that you properly heard from God if you're feeling like this pressure to like get stuff done? And he said like, in all honesty, if, not even just like if there's an opportunity from God, but he said someone should be able to understand if you turn around and say, look man, like, if you want to say that you're a Christian, if you don't feel like, he basically said you should be able to turn around and be like, hey, like, I've got to pray about this, and I've got to wait, and I've got to just like reflect on this. I need to think about this internally. Like, I appreciate what you're doing. This is a great opportunity. And I was just like, that's so true. You never should feel that if you don't make the decision then and there, it's a good or a bad thing. And even to wrap up officially, it's one thing that my dad said, because he was just like, you know, so like I was applying for funding competitions and all of this stuff and awards, and I wasn't getting it. And like I think my dad was just like, I can see you like putting in all of this effort and it's not coming out. But he said like, can you honestly tell me for all of this stuff, you sat down before applying for it and you heard from the Holy Spirit and
Yikes.
You felt that like this is stuff that I should apply for. And I was just like, that's true. That's true. So yeah, that would be my like biggest things. It's just like you never know where these like God could lead you with connections. Always be like led by the Holy Spirit, and then finally, don't ever feel that like when it comes to making, especially like if you're doing business, career stuff, like no one should ever criticize you, or you should ever feel you would be criticized if you turn around and say, actually, this is a big decision. I need to sit back and like. Think about this, I need to pray about it for a minute. Like, I can get back to you by the end of the week. But yeah, he was just like, don't ever feel that you're forced to make a decision.
Oh, I love that. Wow. This is such good insights. And I love that approach of actually being like, do you know what? Even if you don't want to say, I need to pray about it, just be like, let me think about it. Let me discuss it with my team. Do you know what I mean? Your team is up there. It's up there, you know? It's the Holy Spirit. So it's like, I love that. I love that approach, and I might actually implement it. Can I ask you two more questions?
Yeah,
it came to me. So one is, what is one thing that you would say people can't tell about you, or what? No, I don't want to call it a fun fact, but or a misconception. But what is one thing that you would say most people don't know about you, if there is something? It could be a memory. It could be anything. I'm just curious.
most people, I haven't done it for a while, but most people don't know that I sometimes do poetry. I've never like performed.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
I could see that.
You can see that.
I could 100% see that.
But yeah, I don't really talk about it. But yeah, it was basically something I picked up during COVID. I was just like, obviously you can go out, and I was like, there's like, I'm in my head a lot. You can't really go out. You're not really enjoying life. And I was like, yeah, why don't I just pick up a notepad and like just write about different stuff?
I love that. Yeah.
And again, like you were saying with faith, so like, it was something, so like for a lot of those poems, when it started out, it was literally, so I have one called Life Is, and maybe I'll put up.
I think you should share it. I think you should share it. Just putting it out there.
All right, I'll put it out there. I'm not gonna lie, I don't even think I've got it up on my laptop, but I'll put it out there. I'll put links in the episode. But with that poem, like, it was literally just like, I don't know, like it's like, there's this musician that is a Christian one, and I said anyone who's Christian who wants to listen to him, it's really great. He's really great with his music, but also his faith journey is really interesting. His name is Forrest Frank, and he was talking about like how sometimes he just gets like words or phrases for his music, and he's just like, it just sticks with him. And there's one song, his most popular, I think it's his most popular song, called Your Way's Better, and it basically goes like, Lord, I need you now more than ever, won't you put my heart back together? I search the world till my head hurts, to find out that your way's better. And he said that literally like came to him. So this song, which is blown up, everyone's doing dance, like they created a dance from it, it's going super viral. He said literally he was just like on his way back, he was feeling really like low and like was in like, it wasn't like, he said that basically he just was repenting to God. And he said it wasn't even like the lyrics just came. He said the tune for, and that's the way, like, that's why I said like sometimes you gotta trust the Holy Spirit, because the tune for the chorus just came while he was driving. He was just driving and he was singing along, and I'm not gonna sing it, not because I can't sing, but this isn't my time to sing just yet. But yeah, he was just singing on the tune, and he was just like, yeah, I've got to record that. So with this poem, it was literally just like the word, like the phrase, like life is, I think it was like life is beautiful, life is kind, just was stuck in my head. And I was like, okay, let's just put it on paper and let's see like how it can grow and like develop and stuff. But yeah, that's something that not a lot of people know. I don't like, unless I've told you about my poetry,
Yeah.
most people don't know.
I think you should nurture that. I feel like in a past life, I was probably like an A&R or something like that, but I could so build you into a poet. I swear. I could so see that happening. Okay, last question, and this is a bit morbid, depending on how you look at it, but if you knew that you had only 100 days to live, I'm not even gonna, I was gonna say 10, but let's go with 100. If you knew that you only had 100 days left to live, what would you do in that time?
That's a good question. I think definitely, I think spend like, I quit my job. Definitely.
Do your colleagues watch this?
I don't have to watch it, but
that's awkward. No, I'm joking.
But
I'm sure they'll do the same.
And yeah, I just spend time with family and friends. But I feel like there's two examples that I used of like, especially I think it's one of the things that, especially in like Nigerian culture, I know that's why like when people pass away, we do obviously have a ceremony, but it's always seen as like a celebration rather than as like a mournful period, because with like there's this song called by George Ezra called Green Green Grass, and it came out of, I think he was in Europe on holiday, and he was in this town, and like people were celebrating, they were having fun, enjoying themselves, and he was like, why is everyone celebrating? And they were just like, oh, like this person who's like lived like super old just passed away, and he was just like super confused by it. But the whole song is around the idea of like, so the chorus is like green green grass, blue blue sky, you better have a party on the day that I died. And it was all this idea that like death, like someone passing away shouldn't be seen as like a mournful period. It should be like, you know, celebrate the life that they lived. So that's why to me I'd be like, spend time with family and friends, because like ultimately that's the most important thing. Secondly, I would love for like this to continue, because yeah, I know like for certain like it's something that I know like a lot of business people like sometimes think about is like once. Like, especially, I think once you're, like, at that building stage, it's like, where will your business go? And even for me, like, obviously, like, I'm not dying in 100 days, but, like, long time when, even, like, in the future, I'm like, what happens with Pick Up the Mic? Does Pick Up the Mic, do I run it, like, you know, how big business empires run it, that it goes to my children? Do I say, actually, you know what, I've got friends and like family members that have been doing pick up the mic with me, should I just give it to them to have control over? Do I just, you know what, like, you know, as it gets to that stage where pick up the mic brings me like 6 figures, which, you know, I'm praying that sooner rather than later. But like, when it gets to that stage, do I just, you know, do what some, like, a perfect example is like Bill Gates. So Bill Gates, yes, is still seen as like very much attached to Microsoft, but he's no longer like the figurehead for it. And do I just do it like that? So I've figured out a plan for pick up the mic, because I wouldn't want it to stop. I would want it to continue and to run and continue being what it is. And then, yeah, finally, what else would I do?
No holiday, nothing.
Oh, yeah, like, I'd go on holiday. I think I'd just, like, I think, like you said, like,
bucket list.
Yeah,
maybe.
like, all the stuff that you sometimes get in your head about, like, hesitating, or, like, you're just like, I don't want to do it. I'd be like, yeah. And I feel like, even though you said it's, like, a morbid way, it's one of the things where, for like in almost like a month, maybe 3 weeks, 4 weeks time, I'm gonna be 26, and like for me, I was just like, actually, you know what? I'm gonna make a list of like 26 things, because I was just like, I'm not gonna do 26 things before 26, because like there's not enough time. But I was like, I'm gonna do 26 things while I'm 26, and the whole idea was because like I was just like, sometimes you get in your head, or like sometimes you're like, oh, you'll do stuff when there's more time, or like when the business isn't like taken up all your life. But I was just like, you know what, no, like I want to do this stuff like now. And it's because like I think to end,
hesitation.
no, 100%. And I think to end, it's like one thing that my team manager said, not my team manager, my manager said, is that sometimes we can get like lost in where we want to be, but we don't necessarily always enjoy where we are now.
Yeah.
And I feel like especially when you're like an entrepreneur, even if you're like just in your career, like sometimes you'll be like, oh, I actually didn't expect to be in this job for as long as I was. If you're a business owner, you might be like, oh, I wanted to be here by year 5. And it's like, no, like just enjoy today. And I feel like that's something that like I want to try and like learn more as I go into 26 and like for the rest of my life. It's just like be present, like understand like you can enjoy the here and now.
Absolutely.
And not wait for the future to come.
Ah, that was so great. Thank you for your answers and questions. Yeah, thank you.
Like I said, I've never been asked. All 3 of those are new questions, so thank you.
Amazing.
We're now going to go on to the MC of the Month section, which for our avid watchers and viewers is an organisation or individual that's relevant to the conversation that we're having here today. And it's always a bit difficult to pick these guys, mainly because we've got to pick one person that summarises this incredible topic that we've spoken about. But I have tried my best. There is one, but the other one, I don't remember the name, and I may not remember to put what are they called? Do you know the environmental organisation that it's not B Corp, but they do like ratings on like how actually sustainable an organisation is, but I've forgotten what their name is, and
it's not B Corp.
It's not B Corp. Yeah. There's an organisation essentially that an organisation, so like Coca-Cola might say...
Not fair trade.
No, it's not fair trade. No, there's one, I think it's a UK one, because it started out as like a uni...
I'm sure it's going to come after we...
Yeah, honestly, it's always the case.
I can't think of it, to be honest.
But yeah, they basically review organisations and say... So they give them like a rating. And I think it's like from A to, I think, F. And essentially A is like, they are actually sustainable, so this is their policies, this is their practices, but we know actually from like reviewing it, there's no like fine print, where F is like, no, they might put stuff on labeling, make it seem like they're sustainable, but they're absolutely not. But yeah, that would be one organisation. But another organisation we put is Fashion Revolution UK. So they're a global movement who are working towards making the fashion industry more sustainable, transparent, but most importantly, fair. And they do a lot of work around ethical sourcing, education, and campaigning, which is a perfect example of essentially what Giovanna's doing here today. So Fashion Revolution UK, and if I do remember the other one, I will make it appear on the screen. But yeah, we're going to go on to the takeaway section, which I keep saying by next episode, so I'm not going to make that joke anymore until it actually happens. But yes, we're not delivering food. We are delivering messages of inspiration and summarising the incredible conversation we've had today. Giovanna, it's been great speaking to you, but we've spoken about a lot. So if there was one message you want our audience at home to go home with, what would that be?
One message. I would say that you should think about sustainability as something that is all-encompassing of all industries and not just something that sits in silo from everything else that you do or everything else that we need and do as a society.
That's incredible. And yeah, I think like we discussed on before, like it's such an important like mindset to have and to see your work in whatever industry you want to be in or you are in. Yeah, I think if more organisations did take an approach on sustainability and embedding that into their creative practices, yeah, we'd see a lot more, we'd see a better world. But yeah, we're going to wrap it up there then. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
It's been incredible speaking to you. But before we let you go, this is where you can tell people how they can find you. If you have anything coming up that you want to share that people should be aware of, yeah, this is your opportunity.
Right, so I'm Giovanna. You can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram with my full name, which is Giovanna Vieira Co. I'm sure it'll be written on the screen somewhere. My company is The Fashion Blueprint. thefashionblueprint.co.uk is our website and also our Instagram handle. So yeah, that's the best way to find me.
Perfect. Anything coming up that you want to shout out about?
We actually have a lot coming up. We have a few pop-ups in the works. We host a lot of networking events, a lot of panels, but the best way to really find out about it is to subscribe to our newsletters on thefashionblueprint.co.uk.
Perfect. Cool. And thank you to you, our wonderful audience, for coming back to another episode. If you like this episode, like, comment, subscribe. It's always appreciated. If you're listening on Spotify or any audio platform, giving us 5 stars, we really appreciate it. If you want to make sure you don't miss any other episodes of the Student Guide or anything else on the Pick Up the Mic YouTube channel, make sure that you hit that notification bell at the bottom of your video so you can be notified when new videos come out, whether it is conversations, whether it's roundups, whether it's discussions on other things. Yeah, make sure you don't miss out. If you want to support our efforts and our channel, we can't do this without all you amazing people, then please do check out our Patreon page and our YouTube channel membership. You don't have to subscribe to both. You can pick whichever one is the easiest, but both are linked in the description below. And then, yeah, finally, if you are interested in receiving some merch, we have cool Pick Up the Mic themed t-shirts and a notepad, then please do let us know. You can either comment or get in touch with us at info@pickupthemic.co.uk. But yeah, we're going to close this chapter of the Student Guide. We are slowly approaching the end of this season. We will announce something cool because we've been doing that for every season, but I do not know what that is yet, so I will keep you in anticipation. But yeah, that's bye from us here. Have a wonderful day, and we will see you in the next episode of the Student Guide.